Hello and welcome to Mediumship Matters with me, Hannah McIntyre. And I'm really, really excited by today's not one, but two special guests. I've got Will and Karen from the Skeptic Metaphysician podcast. I've said that beautifully. Say your podcast name for me, guys.
The Skeptic Metaphysicians. You did a great job. You were really close. You were right there.
I just tripped over that little bit. And I have invited them to come on today because their podcast is bloody fantastic, guys. Nearly as good as this one. And it covers so many different topics and so many different things. And I really wanted everybody who listens to Mediumship Matters to have the experience. So we're going to do swapsies. So welcome, guys.
Thank you so much. That not only for inviting us on your show, but that amazing introduction. That's incredible.
It made me smile so much. It actually is kind of hurting right now.
No, that we're in trouble.
Yay!
We're in trouble.
I love it. I love it. It's so interesting and fascinating. And I love that you come at everything from a wanting to know how it works way, which is exactly the same as me. So who wants to go first with telling us all how you got into this crazy world of spiritual awakening? Karen.
No, I think Will. Well, because the podcast was your baby.
Okay. So I've always been into this stuff. I've been interested in metaphysics and spirituality and things like that, but very peripherally. Dipped my toe in a lot of different modalities, just trying to get an idea of whether or not this stuff was for me. Trying to make this as short as possible because it can be a very long. I'm a podcaster. I speak forever. So
forever.
So please, so please cut me off when I speak too much. During COVID, like everybody else, we had a difficult time through it. I ended up getting a crisis of a certain kind, where I looked myself in the mirror and I didn't recognize, or I didn't like who I was. So I went into therapy. And in therapy, my therapist introduced me to meditation.
Yeah.
And through meditation, I started opening up to my old thoughts and memories. I started picking up old books I read, and I picked up an old copy of a book that I had with me for many, many years that I hadn't broken into in a very long time. It's called Conversations with God.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And when I started reading that book, it transformed me. I started talking into my phone as I'm reading passages from the book. I would speak into my phone. I would just, what's the term when you
stream of consciousness?
Thank you. Stream of consciousness, just conversations with myself into my phone, speaking about what it meant for me. And I released those on a private channel just as a way for me to get these thoughts out into the universe, like these, affirmations kind of thing. But they became so personal that they're still out there somewhere, but they're hidden. But I started moving in a direction where I was looking into these modalities by reaching out to people that I knew back in my days when I was in Miami, introducing myself to these modalities. So I reached out to my contacts. They would come in and we would talk about Reiki or psychic senses or mediumship or things like that. And I found that the more I dove into it, the more I found, this is a good path. And then on one particular episode, we brought in a couple of friends of ours, of Karen and I's, and I asked her to come and be a guest host because I thought it would be a fun dynamic with all four of us on the conversation. And it was amazing. It was such an amazing conversation that from that point forward, I had to cajole her a little bit. There was a time she would come on every once in a while as a guest host, but then eventually we were going to close down the show. And because it's a indie podcast, I do everything myself, everything myself, and it's a lot of work. It's taking a lot of time away from the family. So we were sitting down on the computer looking to close it down, and when we were doing that, Karen just happened to Google our show. Karen, maybe why don't you take it from there?
Well, it was taking so much time away from his family. I mean, it was, work and then at night editing until the night. And I mean, it's supposed to be a fun hobby, but it was kind of becoming very stressful and a lot of work. And so we were going to just, we both talked about it and okay, it's, you've got what you need out of this and let's move on to something else. And so, so I Googled it and I happened upon pages of reviews that neither one of us had any idea existed. And I mean, I'm like tapping our own backs here, patting our own backs, but they were all 5-star reviews. And we started reading them, and people had written like paragraphs about our podcast. And we aren't experts on anything. We talk to the experts, but we're not doing anything other than getting this information out. And there was one particular review that said that this podcast was his source of inspiration and surrender during his Phoenix journey, which blew me away. Like, I get goosebumps right now just talking about it. And, I looked at Will and we were like, if this is helping one person, we can't stop. We got to figure out how to rein in the time it takes, but we can't stop. And so luckily he found some really great software that has cut the editing time in half. So
amazing.
You know what, when you put it out there and you're trying to be of service and help people, things happen to help you help people. And I think that we found this software, and that was what, enabled us to continue this. And since then it has just blossomed. We recently won a Signal Award. We got the Listener's Choice, and we got the bronze medal for the overall podcast. And we are now starting to really, it's getting a lot of momentum, and we're getting a lot of just really fantastic reviews. My favorite one now, besides that first one, and I'm sorry, I'm just like rambling.
You're a podcaster too, apparently.
No, I'll stop after this. Was we had a review from a UPS driver, and he's just saying how he's been binging the show, and he used to be interested in this stuff, but he can't really talk to his friends about it and all this. And his only complaint was that there weren't more episodes. But the last line, which was the best thing I've heard, was, "Thank you for helping me feel normal." And I loved that. I loved that, because so many people are having these experiences or wanting to know more, but they just think they're kind of weird, or I can't share this with my family or with my friends. So what we're doing, I like to think, is helping people feel normal, that they're not the only one, that there are actually thousands and thousands of people out there like them that are interested. And so we're giving them a little taste of what's out there.
Yeah.
And you certainly do. Go on. Sorry, Will.
Sorry. Well, this stuff was considered fringe, and it still is in a lot of ways. It's becoming bigger, and more people are waking up. And because of it, shows like ours and yours help people who are undergoing this transformation to feel like they're not going nuts.
For sure. Which leads me to what I was going to ask you, because lockdown was tragic and challenging, but was also, in my opinion, a big awakening for a lot of people. And would you say, Will, that is how it started for you, when you're having this sort of looking in the mirror, not recognizing yourself, that is actually your awakening?
I tell people all the time, and I get really kind of weird looks, because COVID was awful to so many people. It was terrible. But it was almost like it was made for me, because COVID allowed me to take a look in the mirror and gave me the time to really change. Because I would say, and we were just talking about this earlier today, Karen and I would change that I am a completely different person than I was 3 years ago. Yeah. When I first started the show to now, the show and the effects of the show and the conversations that we're having and the effects of those conversations have transformed me into someone that I don't recognize now. And I much, much rather be this person than the person I was then.
It is fascinating. Sorry, Karen, are you going to say you agree?
Yes.
Good. Because I remember I was teaching a circle just before lockdown happened. We had no idea what was going on. There was no noise about a virus. And I remember saying, Spirit is showing me like a big tidal wave of energy coming. It's going to change everything. And me, rather naively, thought it was going to be golden healing light or something kind of chintzy. And it ended up being a worldwide virus. And I was like, oh, that's not quite how I imagined it. But how else would you have got an opportunity for so many people to stop the cycle of their lives and look at whether it's working for them?
Yeah. And it also helped the earth, right? You heard about dolphins getting back into the canals of Venice, and the world regenerating, gave it time to just breathe, and gave us all the time to breathe and reconnect with ourselves and our loved ones, because it was the three of us at home. And that was it, except for, occasional conversations like we're having now. But it was transformational, and as awful as it was, and it was awful. It was terrible to a lot of people. A lot of folks lost their lives, and the effects of those who lost folks is I can't even imagine. But it also, when you look at it in that way, it was really great for humanity as a whole.
Yeah. I think people are still, in the UK, we have got people now making choices that support their happiness in a way that we've never had before. We've got cafes and shops that are like, I'm shut today. Now, rather than just sitting there, the owners are going, no, not today. Today I'm focusing on me. It just feels like the ripples are still manifesting through people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And I hope that continues because it's great. There's a lot of strife, a lot of conflict. There's a lot, especially in this country. We're in the US. And I don't think that we've ever seen this much division in our countries. Maybe we have. I don't know, but I've never lived through it.
Well, there was a civil war. But
yes. Well, some say that we're knocking on the door.
That's true.
But hopefully the lessons that we learned throughout the lockdown will reach those that are still really angry about stuff, and maybe we'll find a way to reconnect with themselves too.
Absolutely, because only unhappy people behave in unhappy ways.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, exactly.
So on this journey of this podcast and all these amazing guests and all this information that's coming in, astral planing, angels, spirituality, numerology, I mean, the list is endless. Leaves with messages on in India. I mean, where do I start with it? How has it helped your development and you unfolding your gifts?
Karen?
Go on, Karen.
Well, I think for me, it has really kind of given me a chance to stop and think about what's inside of myself and to recognize things that I had just taken for granted or forgotten about for such a long time. So Will and I have had very different paths, very similar, but very different. We read some of the same books at the same times in our lives. But for me, I never had to look for proof that there was something beyond us. Whereas he wanted that tangible proof. I just knew. I've just always known. And I think some of the people that we have spoken with have helped me kind of recognize some things in myself that I didn't know existed before. And it's having some really interesting outcomes.
Is it? I love it. You got spirit knocking. Hello.
Oh, and how? And how?
Yeah, once they get hold of you, I mean, you probably should have had that disclaimer before you started, but once they get a foot in the door, there's no escape, Karen, now.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it started happening very unexpectedly.
It was during a podcast,
right?
During an interview.
But during the introduction of the interview, it was immediate. An immediate connection with one of our guests and the message that they were bringing with them. That to this day, she's still, just this morning when we were meditating together, right afterwards, it came out. It's astounding and wonderful and scary for Karen all at the same time.
Yeah,
I love that. It's not important enough if it's not scary. The scariness only matches the level of importance. So,
but I understand now why everyone says it feels like you're going crazy.
Yeah.
Because I hear myself saying things to Will that aren't things I would say to him, or, I feel my body feels different. It's just, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. But,
amazing
experience.
So we've got obviously the awakening that the podcast is bringing, the more knowledge that has come in. Has it validated any experiences for you from before you started the podcast? Are things starting to make more sense about the path you trod when you thought you were just a muggle? Go on, Will.
I would say definitely. I think that Karen mentioned I'm much more of a pragmatic. I need to feel it, see it, touch it, taste it. I need to find somehow, some way to wrap my head around this crazy thought process in a pragmatic way. That's why the show is called The Skeptic Metaphysicians. At the same time, I've always wanted to find that proof, that tangible evidence that this was real. And I found it a long time ago when I became a Reiki practitioner. The energy coming through my hands was the first time that I really felt like, okay, if this is really what I'm feeling, and it was, and oh boy, was it ever. If this is real, then what else could possibly be real out there? And through the course of the podcast, we have found the answer. I found the answer. That we don't call ourselves skeptical anymore, because we're not. We're more on board now that we understand certain things. Now our audience are the skeptic metaphysicians, and we're trying to help them to wrap their heads around some of these concepts that we now understand and can get behind. But those that maybe aren't sure that they believe in this stuff, or are interested but don't know where to start, they have a place to do that in our show, because we didn't have that when we were first starting out.
It's so interesting with Will, particularly because he can say, I want to see the proof. I want to see the proof. And yes, he's not skeptical anymore. And he'll talk to people like you and to other different people with different modalities and 100% believe and trust what they're saying. But when it's about him, he's like, let me see the proof again. And there it is. well, let me see it again. Well, there it is. It's like banging his head like, hello.
Well, there's a difference though. With you, it's an immediate response. You ask for a dove and boom, you got 12 of them right outside your window. Right? When I ask for a snail, it in true snail fashion, it takes 3 days to get that message.
You should have asked for the rabbit.
I should have.
I guess that's a tortoise, but right. You get the
right. No, but truly, Karen, from the very beginning, the very beginning of our relationship, I've called her a witchy woman for almost as long as I remember, as we've known each other, because she can manifest things. Things happen. Her and her sister both are just magical. I do feel that they are very close to the veil. They're very, very, very close to the veil. So she hated meditation. She thought she couldn't do it. I started 2 years before she did, and I was doing it on a daily basis. She finally broke down. I broke her down. She started meditating with me, and within days, she was seeing colors and swirls, and messages were coming through, and I'm here going, I'm not getting anything. And it was so frustrating. And yet at the same time, I am so happy for her, because this is exactly what we're here for. So I'm celebrating her successes and her abilities, because now she's on the path that she's supposed to be on. And I'm so thrilled for her. Maybe someday it'll happen for me too.
Well, it's always an interesting thing, because the analytical mind, funnily enough, I was speaking to one of my students before I came on with you guys, and we were talking about, because both she and I have got very analytical minds. And we were saying how lovely it would be to just be like, that piece of evidence was really good. Because even when we get a piece that is really good and really specific, we pull it apart and we say, well, was it? What did I say to my spirit guides the other day? If you throw enough darts at a dartboard, you'll hit a bullseye, won't you? So was it good evidence, or was I just throwing loads of darts? And they were like face palming, like, for goodness, what do we have to give you for you to believe? And I was like, I don't know. I've had so much. What's wrong with me? But there is a value in that, Will. I will say this, in that we are the people that strive for excellence. We are the people that push the limitations. We are the people that see where others are settling or coasting, and we push for more. And so that opens you up to receive more, because you can only receive what you are open to having. So it might end up being your superpower when it finally finishes snailing towards you. But it's so interesting. And I know that you probably know this from all of your guests on your podcast, but energy responds to energy. So just nick a bit of Karen's and say you want it quicker, and it will come quicker.
How did I not think about that? Damn it.
I can share.
Yeah, you've got loads. You've got loads of light around. She's got enough to share. Just siphon a bit off and see how much faster everything happens.
Well, yeah. I am 100% riding her coattails right now. So it's working.
Amazing. So I know you've had loads of guests, and obviously I've not been on your podcast yet. That's still coming. But aside from me, which obviously will take the spot, who's been your personal favorite guest and why?
Oh.
Karen.
Oh my gosh. It's hard. Can I pick two?
Yeah, you can pick two. I'll allow it.
So I would say Angie Hipple. She was the one that introduced us to the Judah collection. And that was the podcast that Will was talking about, that I just had this really unexpected reaction. I mean, she started talking about this network, or not network, but like a family of thousands, hundreds of thousands of angels. And the minute she just was describing it, just waterworks out of nowhere. I had no idea what this was coming from. We don't, just like with this, we don't really dive into conversations with ourselves prior to the interview. It just took me off guard. And ever since that interview, things have been happening. And sometimes I can control it. Actually, no, that's a lie. I can't ever. Sometimes I can ask for it. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So that's been a mind blower. And I'm still trying to, I felt a little bit like a hypocrite saying that Will doesn't believe this stuff, because I'm kind of the same. I can see it all and I can see it in him, but maybe I'm just making this up.
I'm so glad you said that, because I was going to call you out on the carpet for that. She's the worst at that. She's good. She's spouting all this stuff and she's feeling these things and she's beings are coming through her. And she's like, I don't know if I'm making it up. What are you talking about? It's so obvious to everyone but her. Because to her point, she's scared of it. She doesn't want to look foolish. And it's so funny how the scales have tipped, because when I started the show, the whole thing about being skeptical is that I didn't want to look foolish. I don't want to be taken advantage of. I don't want to be seen as naive. So I needed that proof. And now it's flipped, where she really needs to have that proof, even though it's right in front of her.
And it is true about the doves. I'm like, let me see doves, and there's doves everywhere, or a magnolia. There's magnolias everywhere.
Oh yeah.
It's been interesting, but yeah, it is hard. But it's not the fears I think that we have are different. Like, Will, you didn't want to be taken advantage of.
Correct.
I don't want to think I'm going crazy. Anyway. So
yeah.
The second podcast that was my favorite was Jonathan Robinson. He's this incredible man. He has learned to meditate with the Dalai Lama. He has interviewed Mother Teresa, Deepak Chopra. He's friends with Ram Dass. And it was just such a lovely interview. He was so welcoming and so happy. And we laughed so much throughout his interview while learning stuff, which for me, that's the best way to learn. And that's what I think we try to give to our audience. Just, fun. You're being entertained so you don't maybe realize that you're learning this stuff. But he was fantastic. And I had a great time with him. So those are my favorites.
Great. Thank you. What about you, Will?
It's a hard question. I'm a Gemini, right? So it's really hard for a Gemini to pick. I know. Sorry.
What have I done?
Don't hold that against me. It's really hard for me to pick. Really, I love them all. Every conversation, except for there's a couple of ones that probably wasn't one that is one of my favorites. But I think it's so difficult that I think Karen picked two based on the fact that she just had to pick two. But I know she would have, there's other ones that she would have chosen, like Faith and, all this.
Oh my God, I loved Faith.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, no, it is hard.
It is very hard,
right? I think I was just so impressed by this man met the Dalai Lama. That's like my dream. So I think that's kind of what blew me away a little bit.
He was friends with Ram Dass. I mean, he talked to Mother Teresa on the phone.
I know.
So yeah, there's a lot to him for sure.
Maybe it was more that it was impressive,
Okay. No,
anyways,
but we did have a good time.
We did.
On the conversation. Okay, so I'm going to bust into my quantum mechanics personality, and I'm going to say that one of my favorite interviews has been the one that we did with you in the future. I just know because the energy is so good right now. We're having so much fun talking to you here that I just know that our conversation is going to be amazing. But beyond that, quantum mechanical.
I love it. That's so fun.
Yep. I think that I enjoy and I've loved every conversation we've had about the spiritual awakenings, Jennifer Foster, things like that. But I think the ones that I tend to lean towards more are the practical ones, obviously, because of my mindset. So Karen will tell you, everybody who listens to the show knows that I am a fanatic about astral projection. I have been trying to do it since I was in my 20s, unsuccessfully, mind you, to date. I'm still working on it. But we had a conversation with this gentleman that was super eye-opening because we've had conversations about astral projection before, and it was like, well, it's kind of like this, it's like that. But this guy was like, it's this, it's this, it's this, and it's this. And to my pragmatic mind, it was like a salve. Like, yes, this is the conversation I wanted to have about astral projection.
I love it.
And then we had a gentleman from Australia come on who dedicated his life to finding reverse speech messages.
God, we can't pick.
We can't pick.
I have more than two. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I did know it was an awful question to ask you, to be
No, it was
fair.
it was a great question, but so hard to answer. It's one of those questions that you dread, but you love at the same time.
Yeah, for sure.
Bigfoot guy.
Oh,
I loved the Bigfoot
let's
guy.
keep going. Bigfoot,
Oh yeah,
and the UFOs and the ETs, and
that's right.
Elizabeth April was amazing, and I mean all these different conversations. But reverse speech. Apparently, this gentleman. Remember back in the 80s when all the mothers were all up in arms because when kids played the records backwards, it came out with satanic messages. Well, apparently this is a real thing, right? And he's dedicated his life to finding those messages, and he has found thousands of them. And he came on the show and he played a lot of them on the show for us. And it wasn't like, oh, he said, I know you're there. No, I mean, maybe, I guess it kind of sounded like, it was more like, I know you're there. And it was so clear to us that there was no denying it. There's no denying it. And his whole thought process was fascinating because for him, he believes that we communicate with each other in two ways. One, the way we're talking now. But the second way is our higher selves are speaking to each other by the way that we select the words we use, the rate of speech at which we talk, the intonations that will force us to tell the pure truth to each other backwards. So when he was playing some of these messages, he was playing messages from politicians and regular people having conversations, and you could tell they're saying one thing, but then you're playing backwards, and the real message, the real story is actually coming out backwards in his backward message. It was mind-blowing.
I've got to replay this entire interview now between us backwards and know what we are saying to each other.
Yeah,
I'm not keeping secrets from myself. That just makes me determined to know. I love it. I mean, it's fascinating, the stuff that is out there. We've barely scratched the surface in our knowing.
Yeah, Karen and I were just having a conversation earlier today about the fact that nobody knows everything. It's impossible. There's no way we can wrap our heads around the entire truth of what's out there. There's no way. But each one of our experts that we brought on the show brings a little piece of the jigsaw puzzle to the table. So we're slowly putting it together. We're never going to put it all together. We're never going to be able to see the big picture.
And it's a spherical jigsaw puzzle. So
it's a 5D.
Connecting and never ending.
Yeah, it's a 5D puzzle, which is impossible to put together in a 3D world. But we're having a blast they're trying to put some of the pieces together so far.
I love that because sometimes I manage in my lack of intelligence to put together something, and then I speak to my guides and I say, help me out here. And they just go, no, your consciousness is not developed enough. You cannot have the answer to this question because you won't be able to compute it. And then I say, what was the question? And they go, exactly. Yeah, okay, I'm done.
Take that from you.
Yeah. Because I just think there are things that we in our flesh bodies cannot fully comprehend. So we are always going to be scratching at the surface, but that's also why I love it, because I don't really want the answer. I love the journey of finding it out.
I'm finding that I love it too. Before Will wanted the answer very much so. Now I feel that I've got enough of the answer to make heads of what I'm thinking about, my heads or tails of it. So I don't need the full answer, knowing that I'm never going to get it. So I guess I've just given up. White flag.
Surrender.
It's surrender. It's not giving up. It's an intentional opening up.
That's lovely.
Well
done, Karen. You saved that very well.
Yes.
So let's flip it around. Have you come across anything where you have just thought, poppycock?
Oh boy. Can we monitor this before we release it?
You don't have to give me specifics, but just ideologies or ideas that just don't resonate with you. Yes. We'll leave that. We'll just step away from that hot potato.
No, it's a valid question. I think I know how to answer it without giving anything away. And Karen, I'll try, and then maybe you can fill in the gaps here. We have learned that for us, the world. Let me back up. It's been established that we create our own realities, right? It is common knowledge at this point. Quantum physics has made it possible for people to wrap their minds around it. If that is the case, and we've agreed that it is the case, then we can decide what experiences we bring into our lives and our realities. So Karen and I have decided that in our reality, in our world, it's all light and good. This is all positive and high vibrations and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. We've had people on the show that have been on the opposite extreme of that, where they're talking about what we're doing is actually not what we're doing, but what other people, some of the people that we have on the show are doing are negative. And then we're attracting negative entities into the area, and we're putting ourselves out there for danger and things like that, that didn't resonate with us, because in our reality, that's not the case. It doesn't exist. The only thing we're going to invite into our space are angelic beings, positive beings, starseeds, light beings. We're not looking for the negative side of things. So we try to keep ourselves kind of distanced from that, because it just doesn't exist for us.
So just to add on to what Will was saying, we have had a couple of interviews where, we turn off the computer and we're like, wow, what was that? That are very hard to believe, even for me who believes just about everything. Kind of what he was saying, everybody creates their own reality. And I would say, other than maybe one or two people, even the people that we've thought were just, really, I don't want to say way out there, because that I feel crazy right now. So, but just things that we had a difficult time believing, this is what they believe. This is their reality. And they are putting it out there with the goal of helping people and spreading love and lifting the vibration. So who are we to say that that's not true?
Absolutely. Yep. And that's such an interesting take on both aspects of it, because I also do not believe that there is anything bad out there. It's not part of my reality. It's not part of my experience with the spirit world. They are only love. And it's quite a funny thing when people are talking about spookies, and I'm like, that's my grandmother. Because I think it's easy to think, the ghosts in the graveyard, the ghosts in the, and then I say, but that's somebody's son, that's somebody's aunt. And they go, because if you personalize it, all of a sudden that charge of whatever it is in the graveyard is gone, because the people who are buried there were loved. They're part of a family. So it is always interesting. But again, like you say, certain people have certain experiences because of their vibrational alignment, and it's very real to them. And I understand that is very upsetting. So it's finding that space in it. Love it. Now, you've done a little launch on your podcast about the World Awakening Network. Can you tell us about that, please?
We are part of a podcast network that we created specifically to bring like-minded shows together. And World Awakenings is one of the shows on our network. It is. We don't have a huge blockbuster show on the network. We don't charge each other anything for being a part of it. We're not out to sell anything, for lack of a better word. We're just trying to raise the vibration of the planet. And together, we can do that better. So we help to promote each other, and we help to bring different people to each other's shows. And we celebrate everything that life has to bring with it, and we love it.
Incredible. I love it. I love all of the work that you are doing. So I know that we've kind of covered this, but my last question for you guys, I really wanted to ask, and I'm going to start with you, Will, is, so do you believe now? Very Mulder and Scully, but I wanted to.
The short answer is yes. Yes, I believe. I don't know what I believe, but I do believe that something out there, there's much more to this world than the three-dimensional world we live in, without question. I think that, unfortunately, there's a lot of people in this space that maybe don't have your best interest in mind. So you've got to be discerning. So you still need to have a little bit of a skeptic streak in you. But by and large, the people that we've talked to on the show have been wonderful, just terrific people that are really trying to help folks. And I want to believe that we're so much more than these bodies that we inhabit. because there was a time where I was really afraid of dying, and
Yeah.
I'm much more at peace with it now. Thanks to
Yeah,
Karen.
for sure. And Karen?
Oh, I like I said earlier, I always have believed, but now I believe so much more than I thought I could believe.
Mhm.
I don't know if that makes sense. Just
I love
learning and
that.
talking to people and just opening up I feel, I guess you could say I feel it. It's not just a belief, it's you physically feel it. So absolutely.
Oh, amazing. Thank you both so much for taking the time to talk to us. And I will put a link to your show in the show notes so that everybody can go and check it out. But it really has been wonderful to hear your stories and how much your exploration has changed your life. I love it.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much for having us on. It's a pleasure. Lovely meeting you.
Yes.
You've got great energy,
So good.
and we are really looking forward to continuing this conversation on our show in a few weeks.
Yeah, me too. Can't wait.